were able to do some significant line construction. We did have a small slop over in the Cherokee area last night that we were able to contain, continue to push down to the river's edge, and are currently doing a firing operation to try and tie that into the river. Along the bottom part of the 99 corridor, everything was in mop-up and patrol status. We continue to look for any hot spots, and everything is holding good. In the town of Paradise, Concow, and Magalia, there was a lot of work done in there today to find hot spots and extinguish any hazards. Up along the Santos Ranch area, and from Helltown up to Nimshu, we continued that line. We were able to tie it in last night. The burning operation was successful, and currently we're doing mop-up and patrol down below Magalia. All the way through Magalia up into Sterling City was on mop-up and patrol today. From Sterling City, moving north into the east, we experienced significant fire behavior today. It is still within our containment lines to the east of Sterling City. However, there is increased fire behavior up there. We're using bulldozers and hand crews to try and get around that area and corral it back out to the east. From there back down into the Feather River drainage, we continued to have success trying to cut indirect and direct fire line, and we've found a few opportunities to get the fire from the top back down into the Feather River drainage. That area is very steep and challenging. For tomorrow, we'll continue some of the burning operations we have planned and try and tie in those sections that I described that are challenging us, specifically up in the Big Bar area. That'll be our focus for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Aviva Braun. I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service based out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm here serving as an incident meteorologist for CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 4. Dry conditions continue this week at the higher elevations with rising humidities in the valleys. The northeast winds will continue to develop each night, continuing into the morning, with the strongest winds found along the ridge lines and down through the northeast to southwest aligned drainages. By the afternoon, light upslope, up-valley winds will develop. Now these light winds and the inversion that has settled over the valley will continue the poor air quality we've been experiencing. The best window of opportunity, if you choose to go outside, will be in the early afternoon. Two things to note as we look ahead. The first is that beginning Saturday night, we are going to get some stronger northeast winds in the overnight period. This will likely lead to some mixing in the valley, which will help with that poor air quality. The other thing that we are looking at is that we are increasingly confident in some precipitation by the end of next week. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Brent Newman. I'm the commander of CHP's Valley Division based in Sacramento, which also has jurisdiction over Butte County, including the Chico and Oroville CHP offices. The men and women of the California Highway Patrol have been heavily involved in rendering aid and assistance to the many affected by the Camp Fire in support of the Butte County Sheriff's Office. We are staffing roadside checkpoints in many locations, and our officers very much feel the burden that is placed on the many residents who have been displaced, whose worlds have been turned upside down. Some of those very officers, just like officers from the police department and the sheriff's department, have lost their own homes in this horrific fire. The task faced by Sheriff Corey Honey, the county's chief law enforcement officer, is substantial, perhaps unprecedented, as his department renders law enforcement services throughout Butte County, including the deeply affected areas of Polga, Concow, and Magalia, not to mention Paradise. We are here in support of Sheriff Honey and Paradise Chief Eric Reinbold for the long haul, to assist them in working through the many issues presented by the Camp Fire. We also deeply appreciate the public's understanding of our need to protect the evacuated areas. Such protection enables firefighters and workers, utility and otherwise, to work as safely and efficiently as possible in rendering repair to the infrastructure. It also helps us with the concern many of you have expressed to me or to the sheriff, which is a concern for looting. The California Highway Patrol is actively patrolling the affected areas, along with the Butte County Sheriff's Department, the Paradise Police Department, California National Guard, and officers and deputy sheriffs from jurisdictions all over Northern California. There are few moving vehicles in the evacuated areas, and these are mostly utility companies and fire apparatus, if not law enforcement. Law enforcement units are active and alert in looking for anyone or any vehicle that doesn't belong. As the sheriff has said in previous media events, looters will be arrested and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Two final items. Earlier today, the Butte County Agriculture Department, in conjunction with the Butte County Sheriff's Office, created a letter to allow livestock owners access through our traffic control points to restricted and evacuated areas due to the campfire. These letters will be specific to the person obtaining the letter and attempting to gain access through the traffic control points. Feeding and watering of livestock shall only be made during daylight hours, and all persons must immediately depart the restricted area by the same route as entry. An escort may be required. The letter may only be obtained through the Butte County Agriculture Department at the following location: 316 Nelson Avenue, 316 Nelson Avenue in Oroville, and their phone number is 530-538-7381. Their office hours are Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturday from 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. This is the only location to obtain the letter, and it will not be available at other locations. It is also the only letter that our officers will accept to allow entry under these conditions. The public is reminded, for those few that will be allowed access for this purpose, to stay vigilant on current fire conditions. Please continue to adhere to road closures, evacuation orders, and drive slowly and yield to emergency personnel in the area. As you re-enter your property, please be aware of hazardous conditions because they very well may exist. Finally, we took on the mission of clearing vehicles that were abandoned in the roadways and either left on the side of the road or pushed. The vast majority of those vehicles are total burns. We have identified nearly every one of the vehicles. The process is that an officer goes to the vehicle, completes the normal tow storage form. The vehicle then is towed to a staging location, and we have investigators from all over Northern California that work for the California Highway Patrol or part of our vehicle theft task force that have the expertise to identify vehicles that are severely burned. To date, to this moment, we have recovered 128 vehicles, 40 of which were recovered today. We've recovered nearly 100% of all the vehicles that have been blocking directly the roadway, and we have a lot more that are on the side of the roads. We are not towing any vehicles that are on public or private property, only that are on the public roads and posing a hazard. There is much work to be done, but we are very committed for the long haul and optimistic because of the cooperation and partnership exhibited amongst all agencies that we will accomplish any and every law enforcement mission effectively and for the best interest of the public here in this county. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I've been asked to speak up, so if it seems like I'm yelling at you, I apologize. It's in order to accommodate that request. As you know, my name is Corey Honey, and I'm the Sheriff and Coroner of Butte County. And as I have said on my previous presentations, the information that I'm about to provide to you is the most up-to-date information that I have. This is still an emergency situation. It's still an evolving situation. We're continuing to gather new information, and over time, what I've told you today may change or may have to be clarified. I want to start by talking a little bit about what Chief Newman told you. I want to tell you really how much support we've gotten from all of our law enforcement partners, and certainly the National Guard. But Chief Newman and I have been working very, very closely together, and I'm very grateful for his assistance in taking on some of the missions with regard to traffic control, as well as removing the vehicles. And I would have to echo all of his sentiment and statement with regard to our ongoing effort to keep people out of the area, because one, it's not safe, and two, we are trying desperately to protect the property of the people in there. And when there's more people in there than there should be, that makes that much more difficult. And so what I would again ask for your patience, not only in terms of when you make contact with the Highway Patrol officers at the checkpoints, please understand that they're doing a job, and there's no need to be rude to them. But also, when you call into our various departments and speak to our civilian staff and our dispatchers, they're doing their job. They're doing the best job they can, and I'd ask that you please be patient and at least civil to them when you talk to them. As of tonight, there have not been any changes to the evacuation orders or warnings since my last update. I have decided to keep the lobby of the Butte County Sheriff's Office closed for 2 more days. The reason for that is that we have ramped up our efforts to service the missing person call center. The staff that would normally be tasked with dealing with people coming to the lobby have been put to that task. I want to stay as focused on that effort as possible, and so we're going to keep the front lobby of the Sheriff's Office closed. As I've said in the past, we remain open for calls. You can still contact us by phone. We'll still answer emergency calls, and if there's a need for you to come to the Sheriff's Office to report something, you can go to the jail lobby. A lot of work has been done with regard to getting our efforts to find unaccounted for and missing persons further down the road. As I've told you, we set up our call center. We have brought a lot of resources in. That has been a pretty significant task because it's required us to set up workstations for them, get computers set up for them. So a lot of our support staff have been busy doing that kind of thing. I went down there today and checked on the call center and was pleased to see a significant number of law enforcement personnel from throughout the state manning those calls. Through our ongoing efforts, we have been able to locate or determine that over 200 people that we thought were missing or weren't accounted for are not. I think that's a pretty positive number. As of tonight, we currently have 130 people on our unaccounted for list, or persons who are unaccounted for. We released a partial list last night, and now we have that list up on our website. It is at the Butte County Sheriff's website. That can be accessed at www.buttecounty.net/sheriff corner. Tonight, it'll be updated, and the 130 names of those who are still unaccounted for will be listed. We would ask that people check that list to determine whether or not they are on it, because as I've said before, friends and family may have been unable to locate them and may have called our office to report them missing or unaccounted for. If you find your name on that list, please call my office and speak to one of our investigators to advise us that you are safe and well, and so that we can move on to other cases. You can call 538-6570 or 538-7544 or 538-7671, all with the 530 area code. If you have reported someone as missing or unaccounted for, and you have located them, we'd also ask you to call and let us know so that we can remove their name from that list. We're going to be working to update that list at least on a daily basis, and my sincere hope is that over time the list will get shorter and shorter and shorter until we've been able to account for everybody. Now moving to our ongoing effort to search for and recover human remains of those who perished in the fire. I brought in a significant number of resources to aid us in that endeavor. I've done that, as I said last night, because we want to be able to conduct as thorough a search as possible of those areas in as timely a fashion as possible, because we're very cognizant of the fact that people want to get back into the area. We're utilizing these resources to try to balance both of those competing interests. So today we brought in an additional 287 search and rescue personnel to assist with ground searches. They are joined by, that number includes 50 members of the California National Guard. That brings the total number of assets that we have, or resources that we have, helping us with the search to 461 individuals, including the ones we've already had. We've also begun to use cadaver dogs. At this point, we have 22 here working with these teams in an effort to locate remains. As I told you last night, we now have the ability, or we were planning on bringing in a rapid DNA system. I'm pleased to say that ANDE, A-N-D-E, Rapid DNA Identification System, is arriving here in Butte County. They're flying in from various parts of the country. They're bringing with them their system and the experts who can run it. And we're hopeful that that will expedite our efforts to identify remains and then locate or notify their next of kin. The folks from ANDE, working in conjunction with our Coroner's Branch and the California Department of Justice and the Sacramento County Coroner's Office and Morgue, are getting set up and putting the process in place, and they've already have the capability of beginning to collect samples from the general public or people who suspect that a loved one may have perished in the fire. So beginning tomorrow, anyone who believes that a family member perished and they want to provide a DNA sample can go to the Butte County Sheriff's Office between 8 a.m. between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And they can then provide a sample. We're going to run that out of our lobby until such time as a family assistance center is set up or some other more appropriate location is set up. We will update you as time goes on to let you know where that process is taking place. And finally, again, the most difficult part of my job with regard to these particular briefings is to provide you with additional information. All 8 of those human remains were found in the Paradise area. 6 were found inside structures. 2 were found outside of structures. Of the 56 human remains that we have tentatively identified 47 of them, but we are waiting on DNA confirmation, which we're hoping will be expedited by the fact that we brought in the rapid DNA system. And that is all the information that I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Russell. I'm a division chief in the Tehama Glen unit, and I serve as the incident commander for CAL FIRE IMT 4, along with the United States Forest Service, Butte County Sheriff's Office, and the Town of Paradise Police Department. A week ago tonight, most of us went to bed not knowing that we would wake up in the morning to a fire that burns 55,000 acres, burns approximately 8,000 structures in the first 12 hours. We realize you've been evacuated for up to a week, We appreciate your patience as we work through to make the area safe while we still have a very challenging firefight ahead of us in some very rugged terrain. Thank you.
Before we go into questions, once again, I just want to bring your attention, anybody that hasn't signed up on our tinyurl.com/2018 campfire, please do so. Anytime we send out any update on the fire, you will be the first to get those as we send those out. I also want to draw your attention to our CAL FIRE app, Ready for Wildfire. There's two distinguishing things on that CAL FIRE app. One is a map of the state of California. It shows the active fires all over the state of California. The second thing is an actual incident page where it lists the incidents by name. If you click on the incident name, it will pull up all the information on that specific incident. And then if you have more questions, there will be a phone number on that incident page. At this point, I'd like to bring everybody up for our question and answer. It'll work just like it's worked the last couple nights, is you'll pose the question, I'll repeat the question, the discipline specific to the answer will come up and answer the question.
What exactly is being done to combat the outbreak of the norovirus at some of the shelters? And what is being done about the housing crisis that has left many sleeping in parking lots?
So one question at a time, what's being done about the outbreak of norovirus in the shelters?
Good evening, Lisa Almaguer, Public Information Officer for Butte County Public Health. First of all, norovirus is not uncommon, especially this time of year, and it's especially not uncommon for a shelter situation where you have hundreds of people living in very close quarters. I can confirm, lab confirmed norovirus at the Chico shelter, the neighborhood church. And what is being done, people who are ill have been taken to a separate location at the shelter and separated from people who are well. They have separate restroom facilities and they are being cared for by public health nurses.
And I'll come back to you for the second question. Yes.
Hi, so it was a partial missing persons list released last night. How did you come up with what names to put on the list? And will the new list that comes out today have all 130 names of the unaccounted for on it?
So the question is specific to the missing persons list. You'd like to find out a couple details.
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm actually glad you asked that question because I need to make a clarification on something I said with regard to the collection of DNA from people who believe that they have a loved one who is missing or unaccounted for. And this is the correction. So if you think that you have a loved one who is missing or unaccounted for and you want to provide a DNA sample ahead of us contacting you and requesting it, you can come to the Butte County Sheriff's Office located at 5 Gillick Way in Orville between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., 2-hour window, or between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. In between those times, we will be taking the samples of family members who we have contacted and requested to come in. Now to your question. So that list is compiled by the people who have called in and reported friends or family as being missing or unaccounted for. Those names are put down on a list, and if we can't account for them, as we've done in nearly 200 instances, then they remain on that list until further investigation ultimately determines their whereabouts. Tonight, we should be able to we plan to put all 130 names up there. The reason that we only had 100 last night is because I wanted to start getting that process going, and we hadn't yet vetted everything. And I think that is important to note because this is not a scenario where you can wait for perfect in order to get going or moving forward. So I would rather do what we can to get out, especially when it comes to dealing with emergency situations or finding people. Other aspects of it, we may have to wait to get the information we need in order to go forward. Thank you.
I was wondering, how long will the shelters be open? Is there a
So let me do one at a time. So how long will do we anticipate the shelters to be open?
Good evening, Casey Hatcher, Butte County Public Information Officer. We recognize that, as was noted earlier, you have now been out of your homes for nearly a week, and many people are staying in shelters. The shelters will continue to stay open as long as they're as a need while people are evacuated and ultimately displaced from their homes. The Emergency Operations Center is working to put together a plan for a mid-range and then ultimately longer-term shelter need, as well as a housing task force, and maybe I'll just answer the housing question that I heard earlier, as well as a housing task force to work in conjunction with the town of Paradise, our partners at the state and federal government, to help get people into housing until they have an opportunity to rebuild.
So the question is, can the sheriff speak to the ages or the demographics of either one of the lists?
As to your first question, no, I don't have that information. As to the, that's the unaccounted for list you're asking about? Yeah. Okay, so we put that out, and I believe it includes the ages, so you can look on that and make that determination. In terms of the deceased, we've also put that information out as well. If you look at our prior press releases, you'll be able to get that.
Who's the most vulnerable in this fire?
I don't even, I mean,
In terms of getting away from the fire, in terms of doing stuff.
I'm not even sure that, I mean, I think that you can come to the conclusion about who might have been vulnerable, but there's a lot of variables there.
This is sort of a question for a number of people, but obviously it's been many days of really poor air quality, and I'm curious about the level of concern both for responders and people who are working on the fire, and police officers and sheriff's deputies. What is the level of concern for their short-term health and long-term health, as well as just the folks who are here in Chico and the surrounding area?
So the question is, what's the concern for air quality in general for both our responders and the citizens?
Like the level of concern.
Okay.
So the question is about the level of concern for the poor air quality. We're very concerned. The air quality is extremely unhealthy, and we're going on a week with this situation. With that said, I know we're working on putting together some information about some kind of short-term and longer-term public health effects with the poor air quality. But right now, the same preventative measures are being recommended. I know for our first responders, it's hard to say stay indoors. They are out in the field. So they do have personal protective equipment while they're out there. But for everybody else living in Chico, stay indoors as much as you can. And if you must go out, please use a properly fitting N95 mask. We do have information out on both the Butte County website and our social media channels.
With the added resources of the search and rescue teams, how long do you think it would take to do a proper search of all the areas that need to be searched, and that you can begin scaling back the search and rescue teams, or make a determination that you've done the best job possible with identifying anyone who may have been deceased in the fire?
So the question is, with the added resources for the search and rescue efforts, what do we anticipate the timeline is?
We're moving as fast as we can, and it will take as long as it takes. That's an important thing that we get right, but I understand the issue and I'm balancing the competing interests.
So can you give any more clarification on 11 days?
No, I won't.
Just to follow up on the age question that was why that might be, that there didn't appear to be any kids that went missing.
So if I understand the question, you want to know if we can theorize why there's no children on the missing persons list? I don't think any of us are in a position where we're going to theorize or try to make assumptions on, especially questions like that. So we don't have an answer for that.
We got word that there was an MRI machine at the Feather River Hospital that had caught fire and burnt down along with parts of the building that may have left behind radioactive material. Is there anyone that can verify whether or not that is true?
So the question is specific to Feather River Hospital, right? And the MRI machine that may or may not have been burnt during the fire.
My name is Courtney Rasmussen, Communication Manager for Avenue South Feather River. I'm not aware of a situation of the MRI machine catching fire and burning down at this time.
Can anyone speak in general to the levels of toxicity that are expected to be on site?
You just mean in the whole fire area?
In general, are there like specifically dangerous areas that maybe the crews are not entering? Is there any, again, earlier someone asked about the question of long-term health issues. Certain areas I suppose might have extra precautions, or one might be inclined to wear more protective gear in certain areas than others. Is there any concern for workers and the public in regards to extremely toxic areas?
So the question is specific to toxicity from the burned and destroyed structures in the area, and how is that affecting our rescue workers and could affect the public once we let them back in?
Thank you for your question. The answer is everyone should be concerned about hazardous materials and the state of properties that have been destroyed by this fire. We delivered some information last night in regards to when access is open to these fire-affected areas and what people need to take into consideration, especially when it comes to the hazardous materials and ash and debris as they go through and try to look for items. I don't want to speak for our firefighters and safety personnel, but they do these types of things, so they are a bit more prepared, and they do understand and know what they're getting into, but it's still hazardous for everyone, including them.
Question for the sheriff. Is it possible, Sheriff, that given the severity of this fire, that some remains simply may never be recovered?
So the question is it possible that some of the remains may never be recovered because of the severity of the fire?
That is possible.
Now that we're going on several days on this fire, and all of us have been in this room for several days now, how are emergency personnel, how are they doing in terms of fatigue and moving through this area and continuing their searches, continuing their jobs? How is it weighing on them, the severity of the gravity of this fire?
I think it's fair to say that our firefighters everybody looks at firefighters and law enforcement as way up here, and we literally we're just human beings like you are, so mentally we're still affected the same way that the general public's affected. We are very task oriented, and so our firefighters and law enforcement professionals from all over the state of California really focus in on the task. And from hearing some of the stories here in base camp, out in the field, our firefighters and law enforcement professionals are committed to being with this community until the end. And we assure you that even though there might be some tough days ahead and some holidays ahead, we are going to continue to drive through this and do the best that we can for this community.
I just want to follow up on the norovirus question. How many people are we talking about at the shelter that have been affected? And is it widespread or just a handful?
So the question is, how many people are affected at the shelter that's affected?
I'll be honest with you, I don't have that information. As you can imagine, it's a fluid situation in regards to how many people are ill, as norovirus spreads easily from person to person. I think the most important thing to understand right now is that we are taking every preventative measure that we can to reduce the spread of illness.
Will there be have there been any discussions yet, will there be discussions about exit and entry points into Paradise in terms of many people believe one of the top ones is on the roads in and out in an emergency in a fire, and they think that this has to be addressed before you.
So the question is, in the future, will there be discussions on entry and exit points into Paradise for future disasters?
Yes, how do you evacuate?
So I don't, it's a little outside my wheelhouse, but I think, and probably with regard to the town of Paradise, it'd be best to look to the town of Paradise in terms of how they ultimately rebuild. But I'll say, generally speaking, that this area, the topography of this area in some ways dictates where you can put roadways. It has always been a concern about the ability to get people in and out, especially in an emergency situation. In years past, there has been some work to try to mitigate that, certainly with the paving of a road that goes through or past Inskip, which is above Magalia, over to Butte Meadows and then to Highway 32. And that road certainly helped in this situation. In the end, the strategies that were employed, both the paving of that roadway over to Butte Meadows, as well as the evacuation practices that we had, which involved turning those roadways out of Paradise into a contraflow, saved tens of thousands of lives. Paradise will rebuild, I'm confident of that, and it will give city planners an opportunity to perhaps design roadways that will mitigate that risk even more.
This is the same wind conditions as the first day of the fire were to reappear, and how difficult would that, how difficult would things be for firefighters in those types of conditions again?
So, like today?
Yeah, if that were to come around again, like, if one were to say, oh my goodness, a few days from now, the winds were to pick up as bad again, like, is that a huge concern?
So if we had another wind event like we had the morning of the fire, how would that affect us in the next few days?
The spread of fire, and fire is greatly influenced by weather, wind being a major factor of that. So if we were to have red flag warnings, we were to have those type of winds that we had that day, it would affect the containment and any areas of the fire that are currently still burning and any of the hot spots.
With the neurovirus issue, exactly how many patients have been infected and where did they get moved to?
So with the neurovirus, how many patients were affected and where did they get moved to?
So as I just answered, I don't have that information as far as how many people are ill. They are not moved from the shelter. They are at the shelter, and they have been relocated to a part of the shelter where they're separate from people who are well. And the numbers of people who are ill will be forthcoming possibly tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our press conference for tonight. We'll be back here at 18:01 tomorrow. Thank you very much.